Good evening and welcome to Wisdom Wednesdays. I think today is our 19th forum and it's about life changes with changing perceptions. You know, I don't know what it was, but maybe because I was the seventh child, um, I thought I always took the knocks in my stride. Whenever something really crazy happened in my life, as you know, it happens in all our lives, right? We go through bad spells. And whenever we do that, or whenever I did that, I would always say, look at it and say, glass is half full. So even in the worst case scenario, I would find something positive that would then give me a sense of reality for how things would move forward. And I'm always lecturing, and my sisters as well. Because if anyone comes and says, I have a bad day, I'll say, look at the person next to you. They probably have a worse day than you, always looking for something. So today's discussion is about that, right? Perception creates reality. And then there is this quote by Max Planck. He says, when you change the way you look at things, the things look at change. So if one looks at life through, say, a negative lens, you will continue to attract more of that. And it's a firm belief, I base my life on a sense of gratitude. So you wake up in the morning, you give thanks for something that is in your life, whether it's the rain out there, the bird calls in the morning, it could be anything, or this really good rejuvenating sleep you have had. So I think I always believe when you think positive thoughts, you tend to attract positive things. And so when you look at life through this negative lens, you continue to build up on that, and everything seems really bad. So if you want to change your reality, change your perception, break the prison of conditioning, as Deepak Chopra says. We have a long discussion ahead of us, and our panel here is going to give you much more valuable input to this discussion. So without further ado, Soraya, as you all know, Soraya is a lawyer amongst many things. She's an activist, and she's a fabulous, fabulous leader who gives us inspiration, especially where women are concerned, very empowered, Soraya, that's what you are. So Soraya is going to be talking about how perceptions determine our experiences. Soraya?
Okay. Thank you, Carol, and good evening to everybody who's listening. Today is a tough topic, Carol. You are blessed to have thought so that things are worse on the other side. Let's be positive. Not many of us have been brought up that way. Let's first understand what is perception. And let's understand what is this moment in our life that we are talking about perception. There's a singular saying, Drome giniganiddi Nero Veenava Vadanekara. It is such a moment because everything around us, there's a lot of hopelessness and there's a lot of despair and there's a lot of uncertainty that's going around us. So what we're saying is, despite all that, rise above that rise above that. And that is takes a lot of work. It just cannot happen overnight. But let's look at some people who did that. Look at Nelson Mandela. He had a vision that was larger than himself. He was in prison for 26 years, but he built a fortune in his mind. He thought different. He believed different. And when he was released from prison, he became the prime minister of South Africa. And look at Gandhi. I mean, these are some leaders that we know so well. He was traveling in a train, pushed out of the train because he sat in a first class compartment. But there he built that vision. So what we are talking today is something like that. No matter what is happening around you, what is important is what is happening in you. My mentor would always say, tough times don't last, but tough people do. So this is such a conversation. No matter what is happening, just let us be conscious of our unconscious thoughts and behaviors. Let's be conscious of our unconscious thoughts and behaviors. So how do we do that? We must begin to observe the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we act. And this can be done, folks, and this needs to be done. I remember when I was growing up, my father had a phenomenal influence in my life. And you may have heard of this story, the story of the two chicken farmers, where farmer number one went to the chicken coop and brought chicken poop, and farmer number two went to the chicken coop and brought golden brown chicken eggs. He shared some, he sold some, and he ate some. So the farmer number one who went to the chicken coop and brought the poop, his house started to smell. And my father would always say, you have to decide what you're going to carry. So do not ever underestimate your ability and the power to really choose a response to what is happening around you. And you certainly can. So what you need to ask, I mean, I don't want to oversimplify this, but I have been there. I remember when I was working out in the gym about 15 years ago, there was a man next to me in another machine. He was working out. He was like 78 years old. And I didn't think he could run, but he asked me across the machine, Soraya, would you like to train for the Los Angeles Marathon? And I was like surprised that, is he a runner? And he said to me, I have done 12 marathons. My perception was that he was an older guy, and I didn't know he was a runner. But that day he took me under his wings, and you believe me, he prepared. The night before his practice, he would go and leave bottles of water miles apart so that he runs, he picks up the bottle, he drinks it. That was the dedication and the commitment. So when we talk about perceptions and changing perceptions, there's a lot of work that has to go into it. You have to really observe the observer. So on the day, I mean, I was training sometimes with him, sometimes alone. We were running 6-7 hours a day. And when I look back, life itself is like a marathon. On the day of the marathon running, I just realized the choices I made helped me get to that starting point. And the choices I made while I was running also helped me get to the finish line, where I think I finished a little under 6 hours. And that's an achievement, 26 miles. So this is not about this is not an overnight process, but we want you to begin it, because the work ahead of us is very hard and very tough. So we need people who can look beyond their circumstances and join forces. Especially this call is for women. Join forces. Let us do our best, because the work we do on this world is the rent we have to pay, as Muhammad Ali said. Thank you, Carol. Can't hear you.
Thank you, Soraya. Yeah, it's all about that, right? I mean, how you perceive even the worst moments of your life. And I think going forward, we need to be aware of why we think certain way and how it is that we can start changing part of it. I think today's discussion is more about helping people out there to understand, you know, anything is possible. And can you imagine if each one of us can think positive and create a better tomorrow? Can you imagine as a universe, the universe, how that would function if all of us started? I know it's not easy, right? In these hard times, everything you see on the news is bad. Everywhere in the world, you know, leaders lead with a different kind of perception that they have, you know, this kind of external power as opposed to, you know, authentic power, authentic strength, right? So yeah, things may not seem so good, but you know, anything is possible, and tomorrow is a better day.
Yeah. And Carol, you bring up a very valid point. When we said you, it means us. Yes, I think when you're in that mode, you are infectious. People catch on. And then we build this collective consciousness where we are beating to a different drum. And that can be done, and that has been done, Carol. Thank you for raising the point that we should do it in a collective way.
Yeah. Selvi, do you have to add to that?
Not so much, except the fact that the comment that you made, like if every one of us would change the perception, the whole world will change. You see, I mean, this is such a big possibility. So let me just go on to what I need to say on this,
Yeah,
if it's okay.
go ahead. No,
Yeah.
go ahead. Yes.
Right. Okay. It's one of the major findings in metaphysics is the law of subjective reality, which says that when you change the way you look at something, what you look at changes. At the same time, what you're looking at, the perception you get from that object changes your life as well. Whew. Sorry. This means two things happen when you look at the world. Your perception defines what happens in your life. And by looking at it, you are changing your perceived world. It's a two-way phenomenon. So we hardly realize that what we think as what we know is merely our perception, and it can be a deception. Now, how does your perception become a deception? Bruce Lipton, a stem cells research founder, found that we see in a second 20 million bits of information, out of which the conscious mind actually receives only 4,000. And the number that is computed and processed by the mind is only 40. So actually, what you perceive is only 40 out of the 20 million bits that is there. So you can see how your perceived truth is very limited. It's not the real truth. You take in only what resonates with your beliefs. If you want to change the perceptions, you change your beliefs. From childhood, we collect and create thousands of these ideas, which become narratives in our head. We think that that is the right way to see the world and all the others are wrong. I mean, I'm also guilty of this, thinking, oh, I'm right, everybody else is wrong, because I see how I see it. But what I see is not what is there. Now, I found this when I was growing up. I have seen discussions among people. There were endless arguments, each having a different point of view about the same thing. Say, for instance, about God. It was as if people were wearing colored glasses and they saw the same thing, but in different colors. All were debating as to its true color. I used to wonder, if they all saw it in different colors, what is its actual color? And who is the person who can see it? It dawned on me that they can all see the truth, the actual color, if they take away their glasses. If they do that, if they take away their glasses, there will be no argument, no conflict, and the truth is only one. But that's why the Hindu yogi says, I am seeking the truth. When he's saying that, what he's doing is, he's actually doing spiritual practice to remove his colored glasses so that he can see the truth. That is what consists of the spiritual practice in Hinduism. To do spiritual practice, to remove those colored glasses. The next is, what makes up these colored glasses? Several things go to make a colored glass. How you see yourself in your mind. People have narratives in their heads, no one likes me. Nothing I do is successful. I am overweight. I fall sick all the time. Since this is different in each human being, the colors each human being carries is also unique. The second thing that colors your glass are the experiences that you've had in your life. Say, if you had failed exams when you were young, you will grow up believing you're a bad student and you're not intelligent. And when you disbelieve that you're a failure, if you change your perception of yourself, like Soraya was saying, as a failure, life will change and you will become a success. That is why there is a lot of emphasis on think positive. The important thing to know and understand is that your perception, which you think is the right way, the only way to look at things, is deceiving you, just as much as everybody else's perception is deceiving them. This is one reason why Hindus call this existence as Maya or illusion. Now I come to the final point. The third thing are the religious beliefs. Let's take religious beliefs. If you believe in heaven and hell, when you have had to take decisions, you'll be thinking, will this decision take me to hell or heaven? Going to hell will create fear. And if you do take the decision despite the fear, you will be living the rest of your life in fear of going to hell. Literally, you will have no peace of mind. Hindu religion believes in karma. Karma means action. The law of karma states that every life experience you have is a result of a previous karma you have performed. So, everyone who is believing this concept will be careful to do the right action, because he or she wouldn't want repercussions like a boomerang effect coming back to them. A Buddhist believes that suffering should be negated by cutting out desire, whereas a Hindu would bear with the suffering because he would say it helps me to get rid of my karma. Since the Hindu also believes in rebirth, he may perceive his life experiences and his decisions as having the power to give him a better life in his next birth, and hence try and live a righteous life in his birth in order to make that happen. So your perception is actually co-creating your life all the time. And the important thing is to become aware of it so that you can change the perception if you don't want the way life is happening to you at the present moment in time. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Carol.
So, Selmi, I don't want people watching us to think, who are these hokey women? They're all living in another alternative reality. And seriously, do you want to address that issue? Because I want people to know and understand that out there, that we actually try to live by this particular dogma, if you want to call it, right? And it's not that we think of an alternate reality as much as we are looking for the better, what is the good that's coming out of this? Is it a lesson? You know what I mean? So when something bad happens, we are not perceiving it as something good as much as we are saying, what's the good part of it? In everything, there's got to be the good and bad, right?
The good part of it is what Soraya has already pointed out. The good part is, the first and foremost thing is for you to become aware that your perceptions are a deception. So that when you perceive, you actually perceive it with a pinch of salt, so that you don't have to go, into a big argument with anybody, because their perception is also not correct and the mine is also not correct. We are all perceiving it because the nature has made us like that, because this is the only way in which we can have survival in this planet. So it is actually given to us, but we must understand it and we must become aware of it. I mean, becoming aware, like Soraya said, is the first step. And that's an important lesson people should take from this discussion today, to become aware of your perception, how limited it is, and to be able to accommodate and feel and believe other people's perceptions as well as correct, and as much as yours is.
Yeah, and then quickly to add, Carol, what you persist on the longest becomes the strongest. So let's say you woke up in the morning, you have just $1,000 rupees in your bank account, but you have to pay a bill of 1,500. What do? The more you think, oh my God, I don't have. You create a lack mentality, and you are not in a process to create that elevated consciousness to find a solution. So here are some options. You write to the bank, you call the bank, you say,
Correct.
You talk. There are options. Everything in life is negotiable. So we have to have the right consciousness and right mindfulness. This is what we are talking about. I mean, if I tell you the 1,001 issues I am facing today, it's mind-boggling. But I refuse to enter into that space of negativity, because from there I can't be creative. And this is my life experience. So therefore I assert there is a new way of thinking for a new possibility.
I think through increasing your awareness and noticing how you perceive and relate to reality, you can actually begin to notice whether your perceptions are supporting you in creating this life you want to experience, or keeping you, or holding you back from it.
Yeah. And the universal energy, the universal force is such, something will come to help you.
Correct.
As long as you believe and put your belief in that,
Yeah.
whether if you believe in the lack, you will be living in the lack.
Yeah.
That is just one example.
Yeah.
Kamini, you're nodding. You want to say something?
No, I was just thinking about how it was so important for me many years ago when one of my friends, she really got me to change my life's perception towards looking at myself from a place of love than of lack. Because, and I will talk more about this when my time comes, but it's always been I'm not good enough, or this is going to fail, or mainly also berating ourselves. That's what I used to do a lot. And even if something I had done had terrible repercussions on myself personally, my friend's statement saying, looking at myself from a place of love, which meant looking at myself from a place of accepting that I am human, I make mistakes, and lovingly looking at why I made those mistakes, what can I do differently to move forward. And it just started shifting my entire consciousness and the way I was looking at myself. And then as Sylvia and Soraya were saying, finding solutions that were more powerful and helpful towards me in the long run.
So that reminded me of something that happened in my life. I had a moment of feeling kind of sorry for myself, and I told this some years back, and I told my husband, I'm not happy, and I'm, you're doing this and you're doing that, and he put reality right in my face by saying, listen, don't expect me to make you happy. You have to make yourself happy. And I thought to myself, at that time, how annoying a statement is that, right? But now looking back on that, that's one of the best things he's ever said to me, because I think those are the things we perceive, right? That the rest of the world has to make us happy. If I'm going through a hard time, it's not my fault, it's everybody else's fault. So when you look at perception, and I thought, one day you're going to come and say something and I can throw this back at you. but it's true. You need to make yourself happy. And if you believe everything is bad and, you're not pretty, you're not good looking, you're whatever, and you're not a good person, and why is everything happening to me? It happens to you. Trust me, that whole thing is everything is happening to me happens to you. So I think this gratitude is also part of something I think should go hand in hand with perception, because it makes life that much easier to see things in a clearer picture. So let's move to Farzana. Farzana, how do we alter our perception of the stigma of COVID-19? I think this is very relative to today. And how, especially, I don't know about other countries, but in Sri Lanka, how people are looked at when they are in quarantine, or whether they have been have a PCR test that is positive or has had to go into hospital, whatever. So, Farzana.
So it's amazing how all of you have already said most of what I was trying to say on basic perception. So, changing perception isn't easy, right? But it's achievable. The primary step to raise your awareness is to raise your awareness and your thoughts, as we all discussed. And then to consciously shift your perspective with, like Soraya rightly said, positive things in life. The positivity and the consciousness and the awareness will definitely change your perception. So the stigma, like you rightly said, Carol, is associated with a lack of knowledge about how COVID-19 spreads. Kind of a need to blame someone, fears about disease and death, and of course, gossip that spreads rumors and myths. So no single person or group of people are more likely than others to spread COVID-19, but they use these segments to discriminate. So I think the level of stigma associated with COVID-19 is based on three main factors. Number one, it's a disease that's new to all of us and for which there are many unknowns. Number two, we are often afraid of the unknown, right? I mean, if there's unknown areas, we sort of we're a lot more afraid. And finally, it's also easy to associate the fear with others. So it's always not me, it's somebody else. Like Carol, you rightly said, to find your own happiness, it's easier to blame someone else, but we need to find it within ourselves. How do we comply to all the regulations? How do we do the right thing when it comes to COVID? How do we change our perceptions? For that, we need to acquire the right knowledge. So, of course, it's understandable that there's confusion, anxiety, and fear among the public. And unfortunately, these factors are also fueling harmful stereotypes. So, stigma always occurs when people negatively associate an infectious disease, such as COVID-19, with a specific population. In the case of COVID-19, there are increasing numbers of reports of public stigmatization in many countries against people from areas affected by the epidemic. Unfortunately, that means that people are being labeled, stereotyped, separated, and they experience lots of status and discrimination because of a potential negative affiliation with the disease. So I wanted to draw parallel of some areas I worked on with in terms of behavior change, drawing from 40 years of experience from the AIDS response. What worked to reduce HIV-related stigma and discrimination will certainly apply to COVID-19 as well. You know, now people know that just by touching someone, you won't be getting HIV. But in the past, if someone was known to have HIV, I've personally met cases where their entire house was burnt down by the villagers. So, I mean, can you imagine one human being being so bad to another? Again, it's lack of awareness, knowledge, not being positive, not trying to find an approach to support, and then finding an easier route to discriminate. So over the past few weeks, we have seen the perceptions of risk and safety change from simple physical social distancing and washing hands to complete lockdowns. Social distancing is a term that many of us didn't know until, now it seems like the norm of the day, but we didn't know this, right? Until we recently came up with strategies to mitigate COVID. And this has also had a major impact on our lifestyles. So how can we remove this stigma? I feel the main area is community engagement, just like we did with AIDS education. So community engagement is the process of working collaboratively with and through groups of people affiliated with the same interests, similar situations, and to address the well-being of those. And we use this powerful vehicle to create these behavioral changes. So I feel, Carol, even for COVID-19, we have to use these similar engagements that we used even with AIDS education, using little communities and educating them. So we would use 4 key pillars in this. We need to build the capacity, that is the knowledge. How do you respond? How do you not discriminate? How do you support? How can you work together to minimize the risks? And of course, reduce barriers. The second one is to reduce all barriers. And one of the key things is to communicate. We need to find ways to communicate with different communities in different platforms. Just a simple poster won't do. I don't know if you remember this very effective communication that was done for leprosy, Alla Langabalawa, which demystified the stigmatization of that disease. So similarly, we need to use very good tools to communicate the stigma, forum theater, maybe little games and things like that. And then action-oriented dialogue like forum theater. So in order to change a perception, first of all, we need to observe our own actions and their effects. This is what we discussed and all of us discussed about awareness and knowledge. Then we need to really analyze what we observe. We have to look at it intelligently. Have we analyzed it correct? Have we got all the information? Are we listening to rumors? What are the the WHO and other forums saying? Then we strategize an action plan, and then we have to take action. So, in order to engage a community, there are a few other basic things that we need to have, because they need to feel like they're part of a valued team and that their contributions are valued and key to the response. So we need governments to ensure the resources, legalization of the support measures, and to facilitate community participation. If the government doesn't support this, this will not happen. So finally, I'd like to end by saying that behavior change is complicated and complex because it requires a person to disrupt a current habit while simultaneously fostering new, possibly unfamiliar sets of action. So this process takes time, usually longer than we prefer. Thank you.
So Fazana, you know, this is such an important subject, guys. In Sri Lanka, you know, I think they've done tracing very well and they've done some things well. But in some areas, I think there is a issue in that this awareness that you're talking about, that has to come from the authorities, right? Technically, or from the medical officers. And if they tell people, because I've noticed when driving, I've seen posters on people's door, and this poster says actually that no one can enter for a certain number of days, and the person inside can't come out for the certain number of days, which I think is not an unfair statement. But then I've seen people passing these houses that cross the road and give this house such a wide berth, right? So how is it? Maybe, you know, if you really think about it, say somebody has been diagnosed as positive, right? That person needs this social support. And when I have to say, I disagree with this term, social distancing, which came from the West. We are social creatures. If we socially distance ourselves, I mean, what do we have? I believe we have to physically distance, but doesn't mean that we should socially distance. So perhaps if somebody down your lane has a poster outside, as a community, maybe people can say, hey, we can drop off some food. We can leave something on the doorstep and ring the bell, and maybe that person will take that. You know, people need people. And so if we socially distance, and which is what people are doing now, if somebody has COVID, it's like leprosy, or if it's almost like he's a murderer, and it's not. So we need to get this message out, Fuzzy. I mean, I hope the authorities do it. But
and
if
the main
not,
thing is, Carol, it's all about others, right? No one realizes it could. I mean, I'm quite ready to feel that I might be having COVID soon because it's spreading fast, right? And a lot of people that I know overseas and in Sri Lanka have been positive. So, you know, people always look at this as others. It's never going to affect them. And that's the fundamental beginning of change that has to happen. You have to put yourself in their shoes and see, if it was you, how would you like to be treated?
So I think the world would be a better place if we thought that way, right? We try to do that. We say, okay, you see that term, if it doesn't happen to you, it didn't happen. I think that's so important, right? If that's brings in empathy. I'm sure Venerable Tenzin will agree, right? You have to have empathy, because as Fazana said, you could be in the same boat. And then how would you feel? You know, there was this woman who ran away with her child. She was taken for quarantine. I don't know if you guys saw this news clip. And when they found her, of course, she would have infected a lot of people along the way. And when they found her, it broke my heart. She was hiding in a bush. She was hiding inside a bush. And it broke my heart. And she said, if they take me away, who's going to look after my other children? And so this is where you need the social support. The neighbors could have said, listen, this is not in a wealthy area, obviously, but neighbors could have said, hey, called out and said, hey, you know what? We'll look out for them. You go get well.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
You know, I think also this Goni Billa effect of the thing, obviously, because a lot of people don't understand it well enough. Not even the authorities understand it well enough, right? Because they don't know what the actual symptoms are, how it moves, etc. But there's certain things that one can do. So, yeah, anyway, I thought I'll throw that in because I think it's very important for people to have empathy for others, because tomorrow it could be you, right?
Mm.
So,
And I want to add, Fuzzy, powerful call to action. Yesterday, my neighbor was, wearing a bigger mask, and he was having an oxygen tester in his hand, and I had a sense of fear. But today, because of what you said, Fuzzy, I am going to not knock on his door, but I'm going to leave at least a message and a card, or a flower or some treat, because we have to take personal responsibility to share this level of empathy. Thank you.
So, before we go further, I want to say Kamani sent me a reminder today saying, hey, I'm going to wear orange. Activists in GBV have been working for 16 years to get this message out. And, Kamani, all of us actually in this group have worked in this area of GBV. So I will let Kamani say a little bit about that, and then she will go on to talk about the childhood experiences that can leave false beliefs and perceptions. Kamani?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Today is a very important day because it marks the first of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And it goes on till the 10th of December, which is International Human Rights Day. And the reason is, this was identified as a thing. Rutgers University in the USA actually identified the 16 days of activism period. There are also a number of other days that fall in between, like, for example, the days around elimination of violence against Women's Day. Then there's the World AIDS Day, et cetera, et cetera. And the whole idea is to create some kind of movement and interest and awareness about the issue of gender-based violence and its different forms and how it intersects with different groups. So if you're not aware of it, just go online, go to Rutgers, or just do a search for 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. We all have a role to play in reducing violence against women and girls, and also against men and boys. So, and the LGBT community, which we don't speak enough about. So yeah, that's a small introduction to 16 days of activism, and I'm wearing orange today because orange is the color. So talking about childhood experiences around perception, I'm actually going to talk about something quite personal. I'm talking about my own experience and how my childhood experiences impacted my perceptions throughout my life, and how it changed. So I've said it before, but since I can remember, my mother had postnatal depression combined with bipolar disorder. So there was a lot of violence in the house. It was always a very unhappy place. And my father, who was an amazing human being, he really tried to make up for everything. And I used to want to call him my mother, looking after me in every possible way. And I could say he was a polar opposite, but sadly, I lost him also when I was a teenager. So after we lost him, it was a lot of hardship, and it was a really terrible, tough time at home. I mean, here you're struggling, you've lost the most important person in your life. Financially, we were struggling, and my sister and I had to look after my mother. We basically became parents at a very early age. And the thing is that my mother also, like anything, could trigger her to say very violent things or be very violent physically towards us. And like, even for example, my O-levels, every time it was like, you're going to fail, you're not going to pass, why are you even studying? And so I always yearned for my father, obviously. But fortunately for me, Buddhism really became my foundation. Like, I was going to temple a lot, meditating a lot, and, that helped. But if I fast forwarded to how it impacted me later on in my life, for example, if I had to do things where I had to put myself out there alone, for example, an oratorics like a speech or sing, there was always that voice inside my head saying, I'm going to fail. I'm pathetic, or, don't waste your time. And actually, like, later on, I realized that it was always being said in the tone of my mother's voice. And I mean, for some reason, though, it was when it came to things working for society, like the little things I did, I think I forgot myself, and I always had this determination to move forward. But yeah, it would always hold me back. And also in relationships, I found for the longest time, I was always in relationships that were so unhealthy, and there was emotional abuse, and I would just put up with it because I think as a child you've grown up with violence, and so you have to normalize it in some way or the other, otherwise you can't survive. And of course my friends played a huge role in being supportive towards me. So what happened? So I mean, this was always going in my mind, and I overcame a lot of it, but I started going in for therapy last year because I was starting to spiral. I had moved to Vienna, and I had met this amazing man who's so loving, so kind and compassionate. But I always expected the worst to happen. I thought I'd lose him, and I was jealous, I was insecure. And my therapist, like when I started going, and I decided, okay, I need to go in for therapy. When I spoke with my therapist about relationships, she said, the first relationship in our lives are the foundation to how we look at the world forever, pretty much. And so it's like she compared it to a screen. So you have the screen, and if you're projecting a video to a screen, to a projector, the screen is usually white, and so you get a clear view. But if you like, the screen will also hold or be representative of the key influencing factors of the relationships we've experienced from our parents or our caregivers. So if he was unhappy or violent, it was like a screen with holes. And so you would always perceive everything in the world around you from a very negative and distorted manner, like me expecting the worst. So it starts, your foundation is from a negative state. So my therapy, so the solution was about looking at this, accepting it, and allowing myself to feel, to breathe, to allow myself to feel the pain that I had bottled up for a long time. And this has weighed in my life for like the past 45 years. And I just think about what I could have done better if I didn't have this kind of, this experience always being that screen that projected everything. So I think it's a very powerful example, I mean, about how we, our childhood experiences really impact us, and how we can normalize violence in our lives and just continue with it. And of course, I am very grateful, though, that I had the sense of hope and love, always thinking of my dad, of what he would expect of me, what he would have said, and of course, also Buddhism, to kind of find a place of peace. And so I think it's so important, if we've had experiences like this in our lives, that we really take time, and it's really tough. I mean, I started energy healing work, meditation for a long time, but I would say this is where my true, real deep healing happened, with my therapy, dealing with these wounds from my childhood. And of course, it's not my mother's fault. She had an illness, but also for us to come out of it, we need to be prepared to look at ourselves honestly, because when you're in that state of mind, you're always assuming that you can always assume that the other person is wrong, and they're not honest, or they're up to something, or you can be kind of a bit paranoid as well. But starting to look at ourselves, that awareness Selby was speaking about, like what is going on with me, and do I want to change? Do I want this to be my life forever? And it's a tough journey. You're going to look at all the dark places inside you, but it's deeply gratifying, and it really transforms your life and your world perspective. And now I find myself so much just really catching myself when I'm getting into that place, so I can hear my mother's voice somewhere in the back of my head. So that's what I wanted to share about how childhood experiences really do impact you for the rest of your lives, and your perception of the way you see the world. Thank you.
And Kamini, I think this is very interesting that you brought your personal life into this, because it's so real, because you're not relating somebody else's life. So thank you so much for bringing this up.
Thank you.
But I also would like to add to this, like, for instance, a child who has been abused when she was a child, right, by a man, then, you know, she perceives all men as being abusers, and she cannot change it unless she becomes aware of it, that, you know, all men are not like this, but my perception has been formulated by that experience I've had, and that is very important. And that has happened to several women I know, and they have changed their view of life by actually looking at themselves. Another point here is, again, gender-based violence. Perception of women, you know, as themselves as victims is actually the core reason why this gender-based violence happens. And so if they do know that they're co-creating that violence, that they are also party to it, then they will know, okay, if I'm party to it, how do I change it? You know, this co-creation of violence by women and not seeing them as victims is very, very important as far as tackling gender-based violence is concerned, I think.
I mean, I want to jump in for that, because I feel we have to be very careful when we say co-creating of violence, because, you know, there's huge issues around men's perception of women. And there's a sense of impunity. They grow up with a sense of, you know, I can have these harmful thoughts and attitudes towards women. But of course, if I refer to a study that I was involved in many years ago for Care International, where we studied attitudes of men and women, we found that even women had more gender inequitable attitudes than men in certain areas. But I think it's more about, you know, victimhood. I think it's more about understanding, okay, this is not what I want in my life, and stepping back. And then taking action. But I feel well, we've all worked in the field of gender-based violence, but in my experience, I really do feel it has a lot to do with also your environment, the services you may have to recover. I mean, economic dependence is a huge reason why women who are married will stay in a relationship. So yeah, I just want to point it out. Thank you.
Kamini, very quickly,
Go ahead,
I think,
Soraya.
thank you for sharing this story so vulnerably. And I suppose forgiving your mother would have been a huge part of the healing, because when you look at her, when you hear her stories, she didn't also know better, right? Maybe she was projecting the way she was raised. So I have
You're
a deep
right,
sense of compassion for her also.
Absolutely, yeah. It really did help. I mean, it's interesting, when I was in New York, I met a monk who my mother knew when we were in London, when we were born and when it all started. And he was telling me how my mother would come every day and really be upset about the arguments she was having with my dad. And for the first time, I saw my mother as a woman who was like, my God, my life has just fallen apart. But also, I think when you're healing, though, because throughout my life, it's always been about forgiving my mother, so that I could move on and do what I had to do as a child. I think also there comes a time when you're healing. In my case, my therapist had to keep reminding me to look after myself first, and then go through that process of putting boundaries and also forgiving. It's complex.
Thank you, Kamini. I mean, I've heard this story before, obviously, but every time when I hear you say it, it really touches me to the core, because it's not that easy to accept, especially when you're a child and your perception growing up is such. But it's also very big of you to actually come to this place where you are in a more understanding position of what it was, you know. And because sometimes these past relationships that happen in your childhood, they are like a vicious cycle, right? Sometimes they come back to, you know, go through this whole cycle again. So unless you willingly break that cycle, like you've done, you know, you just continue to, you know, relive it. So that's also part of, because of your perception to things. On that, we'll go to Venerable Tenzin. Good evening. It's very late for her, and we really, really appreciate you joining us, Venerable Tenzin. So let's see.
Hi,
She's just moved.
Good evening.
Thank you.
I really have to
Yeah, I think she said she's having some problems with her.
Having a lot of technical issues today because
I think Venerable Tenzin was going to talk about gratitude, which unlocks the fullness of life. We'll give it a try, if you don't mind, Venerable Tenzin.
sorry, I'm having a few technical difficulties. Can you hear me?
Yes, at the
Yes.
moment. Yes.
We can
Go
hear
ahead.
you.
For some reason, I can't actually hear you, but so I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone today. A new location and nothing seems to be Wi-Fi is actually working. So I hope you can hear me. And
We
today
can.
you are handling one of the most important subjects in Buddhism, because how we perceive things is the most important lesson that Buddha taught as wisdom teachings. We have two wings of a bird, be able to fly, wisdom and compassion, and how we see things and how reality exists is what you have just made it so simple. In the monastery, they study this subject matter for many years, a decade, and really try to get a handle on what is that we don't see clearly, what it is. So if people who are listening is finding, I heard you someone saying that, the people may think this is an altered reality. This is a crazy idea kind of thing. This is what is being born by supported science. Nothing concrete exists out there. So in a very simple way, you understand that what we see is like projection. It's we see object, and that object interacts with light in our eyes, and it gives an image that we see as thing existing there. So the image, take any object that doesn't project the same image for everybody. I think Sarah explained that very clearly. So why does this matter for us is that when we understand that we know people can see the thing in the same way, maybe we can just loosen up a little bit on seeing that what we see and what we think and what we taste and what we hear is the right thing. We are right. We are seeing things the right way, and our opinions are the right opinions. We can lessen our grasping or feeling just this terrible indignation about things. And we can become a little bit gentle and kinder when we have arguments with other people. It's in day-to-day interaction and reality, this be quite a useful thing. So with that, when we look at with multiple possibilities that this sense, today I'm going to, I think one of the main things that as a mindfulness, a contemplation practice we can do is to actually live life with gratitude. And I know it sounds a little silly in circumstances. You may say, well, how can you say that in what's going on? You ask us to be naive and live in denial. I think Paul touched on that. Most of you mentioned that when we have reality as people getting sick, dying, how can you say what is there to be grateful for? But in a given situation, in our limited perspective, we can't actually see the full implication of this unfolding. So even when we take these current circumstances, if we understand this way of perceiving the world, we can see that there are things unfolding that in this moment can't fully comprehend. And our little story with our wants and needs and desires and failures and disappointment and sorrows is a very minute part of what is happening, in the bigger picture. And even getting a little reprieve from this, sort of being caught up in our stories, the only one and the real one, I think it is a really real rest, even for a short time, if we can just change our perspective in that. So with that in mind, I invite you to spend a couple of minutes thinking about things that we can be grateful of. So Buddha said that every human life is a precious human life, is something to be grateful for. So if anyone who is listening, and all of us here, so much to be grateful for, because one of the fundamental things is to have the capacity to think and discern, and to be able to distinguish between what makes happy and what makes us miserable, and then make decisions based on that. So lead more and towards more and more happiness and joy in life. So I invite you to close your eyes for a second with me, and please don't run off thinking, oh my gosh, no meditation. This more familiarization. So when we gratitude or any mindfulness practice is not actually a passive disposition. It doesn't come naturally. We have to cultivate states of mind. I think word bhava in Sanskrit, original word, is familiarization or cultivation. So, please make yourself comfortable. And if you want to close your eyes, you can close your eyes. We'll connect with our breath. Breathing in and breathing out. We all know how to breathe. So it's just connecting with it at that point. And just recall something that you be grateful in your life this moment. It may be that you have had a wonderful day, something pleasant has happened in your day today, just coming into the moment. You can think about something you have seen, opening of a flower. If you have people that make you joyful in life, we can be thankful and grateful for that. And if there are people who go to their way to make you happy, or take care of you, or watch out for you, again, we can feel grateful for those people in our lives. It may be that we are safe and we have good health. We can take an active moment to feel grateful. And all of the things, taking a moment to think any other thing. It could be a meal that you had, fresh air that you breathe, the work that you do, that you feel joyful and meaningful doing that, and all the extra activities that have the capacity to participate in life. So it's a joy. When we cultivate gratitude, you become more joyful. And with this thankfulness, we can also recall the interconnectedness of people, because everything we feel grateful for, we know that there are many others who participate in this in our lives. So we can feel thankful for them. So with that, we can think that we can also be joyful that we are able to come together whenever we want. We have the technology, even though people are far apart, and in countries this COVID is still active, there are limitations. We can still connect with this fabulous technology and access many things to expand our minds, connect with each other, reach out to each other, develop friendships, and support one another. So I'm going to just finish off with a little chant to wishing all of the world to be free from suffering and to have good health and long life, and all of the conditions to come together for all the beings in the world to have joyous and happy lives, and all the negative conditions to transform immediately. So you can concentrate in the sound of this mantra. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme. Thank you.
Thank you. Very powerful, Venerable Tenzin. That reminded me of when I was hiking through Nepal. That's all I heard people when they passed me by, you know, this mantra they were chanting along the way. And I found myself doing the same thing. So guys, on that note, we are at the end of yet another one of our forums. You know, leave something with you. When you find yourself in a negative thought pattern, just stop. Release stress, fear-based and negative thinking into the light. Just imagine you're letting it go and then watch negativity dissolve into the light of the divine present all around you. Once you're released, then choose a positive new thought, which is self-empowering and in alignment with what you want to create and experience in your life. So it's not easy. It's something you have to practice and you have to be aware of and remind yourself that it is possible. It is possible, trust me. So next forum will be on the 9th of December. And please join us then, pass the word around, get your friends to join us, whether they are live with us or on Facebook streaming, or even to watch our show on YouTube. Thereafter, we will post the link. Thank you, and thank you from the panel. Venerable Tenzin, special thank you to you with all the difficulty and moving. You joined us today, and you know your words of wisdom, very much appreciated. Thank you guys, good night. See you next on the 9th of December. Bye.